A Souls-like is defined by 4 core game mechanics. In a Souls-like, there are inevitably bonfires. Whether they're bonfires or some other type of object, they all are a location which serve a key function. They're used to allow the player to upgrade their characters and save progress. Using a bonfire also respawns basically all of the enemies. This last part, the respawning, is particularly important as games have used checkpoint style saves for a long time, but this addition creates a dilemma of choice for the player. The conflicted nature of wanting to save, yet being willing to refight the enemies you faced is a big element of Souls-likes. Souls-likes rarely, if ever, give you all the story in a big, obvious narrative dump. They are unlikely to hold your hand through it. Most often, the story is a dribble. Even then, it can often come through as a bit of an interpretive thing. The mantra show, don't tell is a philosophy which is heavily embraced here. The core healing mechanic of a Souls-like is what's referred to as the Estus Flask, a name which exists because, well, that's what it was called in Dark Souls. The mechanic is fairly straightforward. It's a potion with a limited number of charges which recover your health. Typically, the flask requires a character play a decently long animation, which seems to be tied directly to most bosses' attack patterns, making sure you get interrupted every time you use it. Also, typically, the only way to recover the charges of your flask is to use a bonfire, which again respawns all the bastard enemies who caused you to use your Estus Flask up in the first place, which leads us to the last key element, combat. Arguably, the most critical element is some form of combat which requires a high amount of skill progression from the player. By skill progression, I'm referring to the player needing to learn the attack patterns of enemies, understand timing and movement, and have their skill at executing the combat maneuvers progress, rather than relying just on an ever-compounding assortment of stat points earned by grinding levels, which let you overpower enemies regardless of your skill level. There's probably going to be a stamina system as well as a dodge, block, and parry mechanics somewhere in here as well. This skill-based combat promotes a flow of learning through failure, which means beating your head against that enemy again and again and again until you've either learned their attack pattern or you manage to luck out.